The body is still warm, a reflection for those who still have eyes to see. They crucified him again last Tuesday, not on Golgotha this time, but at a bus station in Texas, in a detention center in Louisiana, in a van with tinted windows that drove a father away from his children while they screamed his name into a sky that did not answer. And somewhere, an angel who once rolled back a stone looked at heaven and whispered, "Again?"
And we who wear crosses around our necks, we who sing, "Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers," we turned up the volume on our worship music so we couldn't hear the screaming. Tell me, when did the body of Christ become something we only consume on Sundays and refuse to recognize on Mondays? When did "I was a stranger and you welcomed me" become a verse we skip on the way to something more comfortable?
He is 5 years old. He doesn't know the word deportation. He only knows that his mother was there at breakfast and gone by dinner, and no one can explain to him in any language on this earth why the world just did what it did. He will carry this wound longer than he will carry her face in his memory. One day he will forget the sound of her voice, but his body will remember the scream. His body will always remember the scream. And somewhere in heaven, Mary, who once fled to Egypt with an infant in her arms, a refugee running from a government that wanted her child dead, Mary is weeping again. She knows this story. She has always known this story.
We say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry?" And he answers from a cage. We say, "Lord, when did we see you a stranger?" And he answers from a courtroom where no translator was provided. We say, "Lord, when did we see you naked?" And he answers from a cell where they took his shoelaces and his rosary and called them security risks. We say, "Lord, when did we see you sick?" And he answers from a floor where a woman labored alone, because the detention center does not have a word for mercy in its operating manual. We say, "Lord, when did we see you?"
And he says, "You didn't." That was the problem. You looked right at me, and you saw a problem to be solved, a number to be processed, an alien. You called me an alien in the country I created. Do not tell me your faith is strong if it cannot hold the weight of a migrant mother's tears. Do not tell me you love Jesus if you cannot see his face in the undocumented worker whose hands picked the fruit you blessed before you ate it. Do not tell me the church is alive if the church is silent while the nails are still being driven.
Calvary was not a tragedy because wicked men crucified an innocent one. Calvary was a tragedy because ordinary people watched. The soldiers were following orders. The crowd was just curious. The Pharisees were protecting tradition. The disciples were processing their feelings. And Peter was warming himself by the fire of the empire that was killing his Lord, because the night was cold and the fire was convenient, and nobody was asking him any questions yet. We have not run out of Peters. We have not run out of fires. We have not run out of ways to say, "I do not know that man," while his blood is still on our hands.
Romero said, "A church that does not provoke crisis, a gospel that does not disturb. What kind of gospel is that?" I will tell you what kind. The kind that fills stadiums, the kind that sells books, the kind that makes everyone feel warm and blessed and chosen, while the crosses are being erected just outside the parking lot.
I do not want a church that only weeps at the stations of the cross on Good Friday and then builds walls on Easter Monday. I do not want a church that kneels before the crucifix and genuflects before the empire in the same hour. I want a church that bleeds. I want a church that bleeds. I want a church that sees a family torn apart and does not ask for their papers before it offers its prayers. I want a church that remembers in its bones that our God did not check immigration status before he died for the whole world. I want a church worthy of the crucified.
So here is my lament. Not that the world is cruel. I expected that. The empire has always been cruel. Pharaoh was cruel. Herod was cruel. Pilate washed his hands and thought that made them clean.
My lament is this, that we, the baptized, the confirmed, the ordained, the consecrated, we look at the crucifixion happening in our own neighborhoods and call it policy. We call it border security. We call it not our problem. We call it legal as if the cross was ever legal, as if legal ever meant right, as if the tomb wasn't a government-approved solution to the problem of a man who loved too many of the wrong people.
And Christ bled anyway. Christ always bleeds anyway. The question was never whether he would suffer for them. The question was always whether we would suffer with them. That is the only question the Passion has ever asked. The body is still warm. The tomb is not yet sealed. There is still time to stop standing at a distance and start climbing the hill. But you will get blood on your hands. You will.
The wood will give you splinters. The road will wreck your knees. The crowd will call you foolish. The empire will take down your name. But halfway up that hill, through the dust and the noise and the unbearable weight of it all, you will see his face, and he will see yours. And for the first time, you will understand why the saints wept every time they spoke of the Passion, not because it happened then, but because it is happening now. And the only thing worse than a crucifixion is a crucifixion that no one bothered to attend. Show up. The body is still warm. That's how you know you're finally close enough.